So today we're going to discuss Chapter 2, which is two-voice 18th century counterpoint. So I'm going to do another sort of, you're looking up at the book while I talk because it's a lot of information, it's a lot of writing. But I'll be jumping back and forth and you'll be doing a lot of listening. So 18th century counterpoint, not much different than what we did in the previous counterpoint stuff. A couple new rules, some new stuff. Pardon me. So, a couple of things to keep track of. Hopefully you can see this when it's up on the screen. But so, this chapter covers the years 1675 to 1750. So this is Bach's era, basically. 10 years before Bach was born, and then up to Bach's death, and Handel's death. So this is sort of how two-voice counterpoint is, which means that there are two voices going at the same time, two melodies. So counterpoint literally means point against point, right? I know this is a lot of writing to look at, but point against point, and I can circle it right here in the book. If you're reading along, it's right there, right? Point against point. But the term is basically what it means is that it's polyphony. So you've got two voices, both doing melodies at the same time. That's all it is. Two voices, both doing melody. Bam, polyphony. So this is the way it was done during Bach's era, and that's really the most important thing you need to know about this. So we're going to talk about all of the rules that come with two-voice polyphony and what we call counterpoint. Although counterpoint is generally associated with this two-voice counterpoint and three-voice counterpoint in the 18th century and polyphony in the 16th century. Just keep that in mind. So we're going to talk about the style that Bach did. Now, the two things you've got to know, and you're going to have to outline these in your assignment, which shouldn't be too bad this week. Motive, countermotive. Right? Those are super important. Basically, that's the whole work. You have a good motive and a good counter motive. So basically, it's a question and answer, right? So some of the distinguishing features of two-part inventions by Bach are as follows. Contrapuntal texture is employed throughout. Contrapuntal, meaning that you've got many points, right? Or it's point against point, so you've got different textures. So it's not just 16th notes against 16th notes, all the same rhythm. You've got one hand has 8th notes and the other hand has 16th notes. So they're both doing different rhythms, all right? A single motive unaccompanied usually occurs first in the composition, and we're going to see this in figure 2.1. So it starts with a single motive, all right? And then after that unaccompanied statement of the motive, it is imitated in the other voice. All right? And then the first voice that comes in has what's called a counter motive, which is the answer to the question. So here's the motive, the single question. How are you today? Counter motive, I am fine. So that's the answer. All right? So we'll see this in figure 2.1, Bach invention. I'm going to attempt to play it for you. You can all laugh as hard as you want. So basically, both the motive and the counter motive are based on distinctive melodic, rhythmic, or harmonic ideas. And they're very simple. When you see it, it's going to be really super obvious. And they're going to recur repeatedly throughout the composition in both straightforward and develop presentations, which means that it's either going to be really straightforward and obvious that that's a motive, or it's going to be totally diluted and hard to find, all right? But it will be there. It will always be there. And it's going to be like upside down and flipped and reversed and yeah, I mean, it's going to be totally different and mixed up and, you know, but it'll be there. If you search hard enough, it's there. So yeah, that's really all it is. From a half measure to 2 measures long. I mean, they're very short. Usually it's about a measure. And yeah, it's usually identified because it's the first thing you hear, okay? So you'll see it right here. So in this Bach convention number 4, you can see super obvious. Here's our first 2-measure motive right there. Okay, so it sounds like this. If I can get back here. So the first line is going to sound like. Okay, so that's the first motive. Now the counter motive is just an answer to this. Okay? Counter motive just goes like this. That's all it is. All right? So what happens in the right hand is it comes in with, and then the second hand comes in with the exact same thing, just an octave lower. Literally the same thing, all right? So these are the motives and counter motives. That's all it is. It just flips it up, it switches off. And then the right hand, or left hand, sorry, the bottom, the bass, has the exact same counter motive, right? It comes in with, right? While, at the same time, the right hand, the soprano, does the first motive again, just an octave higher. Alright, so when you put it all together, I'm going to butcher this, and I will put up a link to the real version of it so you can hear an actual good version. But here, I'll go nice and slow. So, this is what a motive and a counter motive is. Alright? Now here's the other rule. After the motive has appeared in both voices, alright? So at this point, the motive has appeared in both voices, right? A sequence, most inventions continue with one or more sequences. So do you guys remember what a sequence is? So a sequence is the immediate restatement of a melodic motive at a higher or lower pitch. So it's going to go up stepwise, right? So we take this D motive, right? And then we step it up. Right? We keep going up the scale. Right? So it keeps going up and up and up stepwise. And it just switches. So, if we flip this over, you'll see the next 2 measures look something like that. Alright? So now on the right hand, we have sequence A, right here. Right? It's moving down, actually. So I'll play this. So we've got right? So it's just moving in sequences, moving in chunks. And then on completion of the sequence, or sequences, a new key is most often established. All right? So when you're doing analysis, once the sequence is finished, you can see right here, moving on, bam. Right? New key. So here we're in F, and here we'll end up somewhere else. So measure 15 and 16 in prevention number 4, introduce derived material from the upper voice sequence while B is coming to completion in the lower voice. So this part, dee da 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 dee da dee 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 dee, right? Here's our little cadence. We end in F. So our cadence in the relative major rather than minor. So notice here at this sequence, we go from minor to major, right? So here we're in major. We move into major during our sequence rather than D minor. And now we're fully in D minor, entrenched in D minor, 15. And we cadence at F major, right? So full F major, fully in the major key. So this is basically the idea. So most inventions are partitioned into divisions, into subsections, and each subsection, concludes with an authentic cadence. So this makes sense. I mean, you end your section or your subsection with a cadence, some sort of authentic cadence, all right? Thereby making the sectional form evident. Right? So just look for cadences and that's your section. So this right here, this cadence right here, end of the first section. And that's all it is. So generally, we have some rules for our sections. The first section, we're going to see the tonic modulating to the either dominant or the relative minor. So it's either going to go to 5 or it's going to go to little 1, right? So 5 or 1, like that, right? So if you're in F major, it's either going to modulate to C major or, if you're in F minor, it's going to modulate to C minor, and then it will either go to the relative minor or major, all right? So in this case, we're going to the relative major because we're coming from a minor key. If you're in a major key, it could go to the relative minor. The second section is going to begin in the dominant or relative major or minor and feature other closely related keys. All right? So it'll go to C major, for example, right? And then it will hang out in things like D major, C major, might hit over to B flat major, A minor, all those related keys that we talked about during our modulation exercise, right? So you can go up a perfect fifth, down a perfect fifth, or to any of their relative minors, right? So it's going to hang out in those closely related keys. And then section 3 will begin on a closely related key and quickly modulate back to tonic, okay? So it's just going to go right back to tonic and end on tonic, and that's all it is. All right?